I've talked to a lot of people that, are not, African American or Latino. And I always try to reassure them, like, at the end of the day, is there anger? Is there truth about what's been happening in America and systemic systems and all that? Yeah, sure. But what I don't want is I don't want my fellow brethren, to feel I mean, granted, you have some people that are very outright, and it's not a place of ignorance. It's like, this is what I believe, and it's how I've been raised. But then we have people who are like, man, I was just living life. And I think what happens is when systems are put in place and people are programmed, we just kind of go with what is. And so I try to tell people, man, it's all love, man. Like, I want to have a conversation. I want to be fair. I don't want to make it one-sided. As much as there is things on my end that I've suffered from, we can't. And this is just something that's been convicted through me, just through study and through just praying and through my walk with the Lord. I can't just kind of walk around so angry and so frustrated that we don't get to a resolve and we don't get to a place of reconciliation. And we don't just have a conversation like, hey, at the end of the day, we just want equity. We want equality, and we just want to be treated. Hey, you don't know my background, I don't know yours, but at the end of the day, we're human beings, we're image bearers of God. And so let's just learn about each other, and let's not be awkward, right? Like, you don't have to do weird things. Like, we're cool, like, we can work, like, hold me accountable, even in the professional world, right? To my white, band directors and friends, like, seek out information, get the information, use it for your context, but I'm not looking to kind of rework the wheel, man. Let's just be honest about history, and let's just kind of let what history is, the truth of it, rest on us and say, okay, I have to start thinking differently. I don't have to start, changing the scale. Just think differently, open doors if they need to be open. It's the same thing we teach our kids, like the privilege that I have as an educated African-American male and all the different things that I have. What am I doing for kids that look like me or don't look like me?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now to my next guest, Justin McLean. Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Mark?
Good. Thanks for joining me tonight. Now, you and I have already had quite a conversation about
yes, we have
about things that are important in this world. And so,
right.
Why don't you're the host of the Score, one of the co-hosts of the Score podcast, another band podcast. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Maybe talk about who you are and a little bit about the Score, and then we'll come and talk about your origin story.
Okay. My name is Justin McClean. As Mark already said, I'm a husband, father of soon to be 4 come August. My last child will be here, my baby girl. I'm currently a percussion director, assistant band director in Fort Bend ISD, which is a small little suburb of Houston, right outside of Houston, of Sugar Land, Missouri City, and all of that good stuff. So I'm at a middle school, Lake Olympia Middle School, and I also am at Hightower High School. So I'm teaching percussion, beginner, 7th grade, 8th grade, and also helping out with the performing bands in the morning. I usually have my lunch break, my little planning period. I shoot over to Hightower where I have my percussion groups, and then I'm helping out with those bands there at the high school, developing, working through the percussion ensemble. And just, this is my first year here. I was in HISD for the last 8 years of my career. And so I'm just fleshing out and developing the percussion program. It was kind of raw and out of place when I got here. It's a brand new staff at the high school and at the middle school. But we're working together. I think we would have really had some great success had COVID not kind of hit us where it did, but we were definitely working, and man, very excited. I was very excited for the kids for concert season in UIL and getting ready for sight reading and all of that. But like I said, that's what I do. We're in a good place. We're building a band. The band is already increasing in numbers. The middle school stuff is going, and so I'm excited. And I'm a co-host of a band podcast, and we're just speaking through our experiences, things that we've learned, things that we've studied, things that were different than what they said they would be when we were in the classroom as, undergrad. That show has kind of had an organic build, and it's taken a life of its own. And we're glad about it. I think me and Eric never thought that we would be having planning meetings and meetings throughout the week to talk about who's next and these, that, and the third. We were just like, hey, we meet at the spot where we record, and we were just taking conversations from when we worked together. He was the head director. I was the assistant director and percussion director. And we were just talking our truth in the office during off periods, after rehearsals, after games, during all city things and solo and ensemble. And we just begin to kind of say, man, somebody else is going to need this information. And after we went out, he moved up to the college ranks. I ended up moving to another district. We're good friends. So he was like, man, we should do a podcast. I was like, I guess let's do it. I had already kind of been thinking about it. I was like, yeah. And, it started super, humble. Like I was bringing, equipment from my own home that I use for production and recording. And he had some stuff and from his DJing days. And we just kind of did an episode, and it just kind of went. And it's been very good. And I feel very good about it because I think it gives voice to what they don't teach you in undergrad. And we're speaking to, I would say, the majority of what most people will experience in their music educational life, right? And so, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
You guys also fill a niche in the band podcast community that hasn't been filled. I kind of know everybody at this point, and I know what everyone
right.
brings to the table, and you guys bring a very sort of, as you say in your intro, an urban podcast, an urban band director. You're dealing with, you're African American, Justin's Latinx,
right,
and so it's a very different perspective than what we normally hear, let's say, from other band podcasts. And so it's really terrific. And we're going to get into some of those issues because they're pertinent and timely right now. But
yes, sir.
Before we do, Justin, can you tell everyone your origin story? How'd you get started in music and a little bit of your early years?
So I kind of came up in a musical family, you could say. As I got older, I found out my grandmother, was in band, clarinet player. My grandfather was a trombone player. My mother, I think she played a little bass clarinet. And music is kind of around. My grandmother sings. My grandfather, who's a minister, he sings. My great grandmother, they were singers in church, and there were people that played instruments and things like that. And so my introduction to music was church, man. Like Sunday morning, mass choir, organist, pianist, bass, guitar, drums. That is what I lived for, man. Like I couldn't, Sunday was so exciting because I was able to kind of go to this place in my mind and imagine things and kind of go to another world that I only found when I was listening to music at my grandmother's house or in the car or with my mother and things like that, or my dad. So church, that was the foundation, man. I can remember rolling up the programs of church and beating on the back of the pews while the church was, going up in music. Drums kind of caught me. I can remember as early as 2 or 3, trying to climb on top of the drum throne and just hit on stuff. And my grandmother tells stories about how I used to pull out all her pots and pans and go to town on that. And so church was my first introduction. I started playing drums, man, around 4 or 5. I was getting opportunities to play during the actual service, around 6, 7, 8, playing for the children's choir, singing in the choir, leading songs. And then listening to a lot of music. My grandmother played a lot of Frankie Beverly and Mays, a lot of Luther Vandross. I heard a lot of, R&B. My mother was more 80s, so I heard, 80s R&B. And then my dad was hip hop. And so it was just this collection of music. And so by the time I got to 6th grade, that was my introduction to formal music ed, right? And we do the normal, hey, here's a band drive. You come, you show up, all of that. And so on my way to the band drive, I'm telling my mom, I'm playing drums. I don't know, I don't know what they have planned, but I have a presupposition to play drums. So I get in there and my mom is like, oh, you just need to be open. There may be some, I'm telling you now, if it's not drums, then I'm not doing band. So we go, they take me over to the brass, or we try woodwind, sax. That didn't work. Of course, I wasn't trying to be compliant. I go over to the brass table, and they give me a euphonium, trombone euphonium, and I made a nice little buzz. I was like, I just want to play drums. So they end up reluctantly, giving me, okay, we're going to put you in percussion. Signed up, got my bell kit. And sixth grade is where it started. And I would say that where we are now in beginner band and how fleshed out it is and how it's very, heterogeneous instead of homogeneous, which it was for me in sixth grade, is light years away. Like I miss this older white lady, Miss Brown. No, what's her name? Miss Brown. I think her name was Miss Brown. She was my band director, and she had her percussion class that was kind of split with another group, but it was a bunch of just like, we were rambunctious. Like I think about her now and I'm just like, Jesus, golly, we gave her a hard time, but a lot of what I learned there, oddly enough, I had already experienced in church. Like I had already experienced this, I didn't know what a rallentando was, but I knew I saw it from the choir director at church. I didn't know what, a count off was or a preparatory beat, but I knew I seen it in church. I didn't know what, I didn't know the technical term for digga 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 doom. Right. But I knew I did that across the toms. I knew about 4/4. I knew all of these things. So I would say my early music ed, man, was connecting what I did in church and then saying, oh, that's what that is. So I did a lot of feel, counting and all of that came later, but I was able to kind of look at it and then in my brain be able to kind of hear what it sounded like. And that's what it was. I went from there to 7th grade and 8th grade at the junior high where I had Miss Jackson and Mr. Nagai, and I was a middle school band. And once again, there was no percussion director to pull the percussion kids out. We kind of stood at the back of the room and fell asleep or just did all of the stuff that little kids do in middle school. But we stayed current. We did the UILs. We did the solo ensembles. We did the region band. I remember all of that. We did our concerts. And then I got to high school. And high school is what I'll say changed my life musically. My high school director, Tim Taylor, to this day, is the guy that I credit with where I am right now. He was a African-American man. I'm talking about mean as hell, Mark. Like those first 2 years, he was like, no. And he shaped me, in so many ways that I'm forever grateful for that. I think even now as a professional, I find myself doing things that I remember him doing as my high school band director. And granted, he was a world-renowned trombone player. I mean, just a great, all of that. But a lot of who he is, I saw myself in him. So when I got there, he shaped me up, man. He made me a leader my junior year, drumline, percussion leader, section leader, and, vice president of the band and all of that. And it grew me in so many ways. I was in a jazz band, percussion ensemble, indoor stuff. I wish, if I could go back, I'd wish that I'd take some things a little bit more seriously because yet again, we still didn't have that hardcore. Right now, you go to most high schools in the South or we'll say Texas, band capital, if you will. And there's this percussion director, percussion program from 6. I didn't necessarily have that, right? I just had, because I had a skill set and I knew what I was doing, I was kind of put in places of power and leadership, but it helped me grow. And that I got introduced heavily into jazz like my 8th grade going into high school. I was in a jazz band, and because I played at church, playing in a jazz band, I was like, oh, this is just like Sunday morning, right? And so all of those things kind of got me to where I was, graduated, ended up I wanted to go to Tech. That's where I wanted to go. But I was doing college tours in high school, and I went to different HBCUs, and Prairie View was a place that stuck out to me because of the small classroom size, being able to know professors on a one-on-one basis. And I knew that as much natural talent as I had, I still was very much behind in regards to certain things that I just didn't know. And it wasn't because I didn't want to know them. I just don't think that we had the things in place. We had a great band program. All I remember is getting sweepstakes in high school, straight ones on stage, straight ones in concert sight reading, going solo. Like my band director has plaques upon plaques. He's still teaching, great director. But I was a great musician that was able to do my part. I still needed some very specific tools to be a great percussionist. And so going to Prairie View helped me build that. And I wouldn't change it, man. I wouldn't change it for the world. I got there. I met some great people, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Selden, Dr. Cornelius, even Professor Jones, my private lessons teacher, and just the environment that there's what catapulted me into where I am, being able to lead out. When I came in my freshman year, I was one of the only guys that had a background in just kind of doing percussion stuff, whether that was some 4-mallet, 2-mallet, percussion ensemble. So my freshman year, I was already playing on senior recitals. I was already playing with seniors and juniors on percussion ensemble stuff. And I was like, wait, I just got here, and it was refreshing. But at the same time, most of the times in my life and where I am as an educator, if I'm not pushed to do things that are uncomfortable, I don't grow. So the success that I've been able to attain is because I push myself in environments that have caused me to say, hey, you're going to either put up or shut up. Either you're going to stay in this practice room and play this marimba till your hands hurt and get this part down, or you're going to stay the same. And so I think Prairie View was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I'm sure I could sit and talk with other percussion guys that went to UNT or went to Texas State or Texas Tech. And by all means, that's great. But I think for me and what I'm doing, and at the end of the day, success is success. I've still been able to send kids to state percussion, solo ensemble, still got region kids, still got kids to prepare for college and doing DCI. So it doesn't change. That experience for me made my life that much better. And, yeah, that's how I came to be where I am right now.
So I have some questions.
Yeah.
One of the things that's a recurring theme, and every African-American band director, musician, performer, composer who's been on this show, I would say that 90% or more credit the church,
man,
as is part of their background. Is there something to you that's, I mean, obviously it's culturally relevant, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm asking, but it's so astonishing to me that the church is so important in the Black musician's life and in the story of so many.
I think so. Here's the irony, right? What's ironic to me, when I was in my music history class, we discussed so much about that focus of apprenticeship and how the church musicians, that was kind of like the learning ground. And as we've transitioned over time, church has kind of become maybe more of a novice thing. And now the universities have become, right. And that's fine. But I think for me, I registered with that because when I got in church, what they do and what the church has done for me is they have affirmed, helped, and mentored me in ways that I don't know. I mean, I could have been taking drum lessons. I could have had a private teacher, right? That could have been my route. But what that did was it forced you to learn, to accept accountability, to accept criticism, and be ready when it was time to go. Right. There's this performance. Let me not use performance. Some people may take that weird. But for me, there's this, you have to show and prove every Sunday. 10 o'clock, it's time to go. And we're going to go over what you did, like what we did Wednesday or Thursday night for choir rehearsal. But we may take a left turn somewhere in here. We may do this. You need to be paying attention to the director, pay attention to the band leader, and we need to be ready to go. And so I think by the time I got to sixth grade, one of the things I noticed when we would have chair tests or end of week tests, kids would literally be like losing their minds. Their palms are sweating. They're super nervous. And for me, I was just like, what is wrong with y'all? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, Sunday morning, I got, 90 to 100 some odd people, plus a 30, 40 voice choir, pastors, the organ player, dang, they're cussing you out if you miss tempo. You know what I'm saying? So these things are pressing upon me. And so the church was a place where you could be developed, you could be groomed, and they didn't mind you showing off what you were able to do. I think what the difference is between church and that private lesson, that kid is taking that piano lesson for one piano recital, or they're taking that trumpet or guitar lesson and they have that one recital. And then it's kind of like, all right, we're moving to the next thing. So what about all the things that I've learned? When do I get to, for me, it was like, all right, we learned this song. This song is happening on Sunday. Right. And then we're learning another song. So it's building this memorization. It's building this understanding of how the music should flow and being open to, when I got to high school, I learned so much about Mr. Taylor talking about how do we tell this story? What are we putting into this section? How are we letting this music flow? And I think it was hard for certain kids to get, but for me, it's telling a story. So musically, emotionally, there's something here with this buzz roll that leads into this clarinet, melody line or whatever the case may be. So for me, the church, they acknowledge, they allow you to grow, and they allow you to like show off, and so it was, man, it's like it's a canvas every Sunday. And so it's exciting, man.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said a few more things in there that catch my my attention. The fact that you had already had practice as a performer, I think that's really crucial. You kind of knew what to expect. The other thing is, the psychology of music. It talks about, young children need affirmation.
Yeah.
Young children want to feel successful as musicians in the early years. That's the biggest indicator of whether they'll continue or not.
Yep.
They have to feel affirmed. And so it sounds like that nurturing, while you were getting criticized if you made a mistake, while you were expected to perform, you were also nurtured. It doesn't sound like anyone was particularly cruel. I mean, it felt
No.
Yeah. So that, what I mean? I think there's something there. It's really interesting.
And Mark, in it, I don't even know that even if there were moments where, because I'm pretty sure there were times where I was playing too loud or I got too crazy in a solo section, right? Or the bridge of a song, and they had to bring me down. But I think because there was this not only affirmation, but allowing me to work out what I was learning. Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, now I know how to pull back. Now I know, okay, that's a phrase. We end here and I'm back to playing time. Yeah. So, I'm pretty sure there was some moments because I'm trying to, if I figure something out in rehearsal or I went home and learned this new lick, I'm trying to stick that lick in there as soon as we get back to service. And I had to, I had to learn that there is, there's beauty in silence and there's beauty in less playing. So, yeah,
no doubt. I just that connection is just too strong.
Yeah.
From, interestingly enough, even from some of the musicians I've spoken with who aren't particularly religious anymore, they still credit that experience.
It's life-changing, Mark, because you don't think, I think what you said earlier, the success that kids get early on gives them this idea like, oh, I can make music. When you feel that moment of like, wow, I'm like, this is coming together. I'm kind of like a centerpiece in this. This actually sounds good. Now, even if I find my way doing something different musically and I'm no longer in church, I still have that memory and that idea where in my new context, okay, I've been here before, there's this moment that it just kind of comes together. So
I would wager, and now again, this is an overgeneralization, but I would wager that most of my listeners, or most of those out there listening, can remember someone saying something good about them as a musician when they were young.
Yeah.
That they carry with them as something like,
yes,
so and so believes in me. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to work hard.
I have two instances, Mark. And this is my high school band director. We are on the field. We have just finished a run through. Now I'm section leader for 2 years. I could have been in my sophomore year, but I just wasn't mature and ready enough. But my high school band director was not a guy that came around and said, "Great job for everything you did." He was appreciative. Let's work. Let's continue working. Let's continue building. And I can remember we finished a rehearsal and he was standing next to me, kind of giving his last things out to the band before we walk off the field. And he finished and he just kind of whispered in my ear and he was like, "You're doing a damn good job." Now, at that time, I'm a junior in high school. I've never heard, this man has probably told me, "Justin, get in line. What are you doing? Why haven't these kids done this? These drums need to be clean. This section needs to be clean. I need you to," like, I've probably heard that more than anything else. And when he said that, even to this day, Mark, I kid you not, from the time I was a director of bands, before I moved into being a percussion director, and I'm on the podium getting ready to conduct or getting ready to talk through sight reading, or I'm at school, I still hear his voice saying, "You're doing a damn good job." And it just lets me know I can do this. Right? I may not be having my best teaching day. I may not have analyzed the score as much as I wanted to last night, but this is possible and I can figure out how to get this done. So I would totally agree with what you just said, man.
The little things we can say to a kid, the way we can change a course of a life if we're just intentional about the way we treat kids.
Man, that's the crux of it all, man.
Mm-hmm. That's why we do what we do, hopefully.
Yeah.
If you're not, you're probably in the wrong business.
Yeah, you got to get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, the other thing that comes up as I listen to your show and then I listen to you talk about your background is you guys talk about a song of the week or a song of the episode, and you mentioned that you have quite a background. You sang in the choir, and you had a diverse sort of musical influences from R&B to soul to hip hop. What's that diversity in your background as far as music, and how does that shape what you do now?
You know what? I try to pull from those things and those places to try to help kids know that although we're in a classical world and we're doing, kind of this Western thing, that there are some themes and there are some ideas that happen in those sections of music that we can pull here, right? Whether it's the aggressiveness of a hip hop record talking through whatever they may be talking through, or maybe it's the gut wrenching aspect of a gospel song or a soul record, right? Like one thing I've tried to do in my career is I've tried to pull from popular music to help kids see the connection, right? And I wish I could sit on your show and say, well, we talk through different classical things. And don't get me wrong, I do. I try my best to give historical context. But for me, I know that a lot of these kids, it's such a joy to have my students come back to me and say, I listened to this other piece I found on UIL, or I was looking up some pieces you were telling me to listen to, and it sounds very similar to this song, right? So the fact that I've opened your ears to this world of classical music that is probably not on your podcast or your iPhone or whatever, it lets me know that you're starting to understand how interwoven like music is, right? And so for me, and on the show, I always talk about how I'm listening to this, ratchet song or whatever and stuff like that. For me, I'm always trying to find the nuances of how this stuff like draws together. How can I listen to a UNT percussion ensemble piece because I'm trying to pick a program, but then at the same time I might listen to a record from Common or Kanye West and I'm like, whoa, that's not, like these two things are very much alike. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I'm trying to bring those experiences into the room. I'm trying to make the kids feel very vulnerable by playing something they know or speaking to something they know, and then pulling out something simple, whether hey, that song you listen to is in 4/4 and it has it leans on the last beat to push into the next. That's kind of what I want you to do on the end of this phrase when we're going across the bar line. Like I want you to lean, and so for me, I'm trying to use what is common to them, because I think we lose kids in the classroom at times when I only talk from the perspective that I'm familiar with, right? Like I spent 4 years in high school. I spent another 4.5 in college, just devoting my time to these books and these urban books and all of this stuff. Man, I got these kids for 45 minutes to an hour. If I don't connect with them within the first 5 to 10 minutes by bringing my real life and exposing, like my kids, I blew their mind when they found out I don't listen to classical music every day, or that I'm not driving around listening to our program for the UIL concert, right? Do I listen to it? Yes, of course. But, and so I think that would be me, man. I couldn't be myself if I didn't pull from my gospel influence, if I didn't pull from, jazz and just how I've been able to say, wait, this is just, okay. This is a take on, I've played this chord before, so yeah.
So it's really interesting, this is a big topic, of course, but
yeah.
As teachers, we have to be aware that, and I think it's changing and getting better in music education.
Yeah.
But, I think we always have to be aware that we have to, see these other perspectives, even though we're trained in a certain way.
Yeah. And I don't think you should force it, right? I don't think you should go in with this idea of like, okay, I'm going to take what I just heard from Bruno Mars and I'm going to talk. No, like let it be organic. I think for me, it's a little bit more natural because of my life, right? My musical life. Like I'm playing at church on Sundays. I'm producing records for my wife. And so I'm kind of inundated with all of this. So it just happens while I'm, when I was doing more conducting and standing on the podium, I'm studying this score. I'm looking at these chords, analyzing this. Okay, melody accompaniment. And then in my mind, I'm thinking like, this is kind of like this record. Oh, okay, cool. Because I'm trying to figure out the words that'll help kids that are not musically inclined and don't have all of the, the brain power to materialize something very just on the paper. I'm trying to say something that'll help them say, oh, okay, I got it, right?
So, Justin, you mentioned Mr. Taylor and his influences. As a band director now, and in your job today, what are you taking from him that you're using in your classroom? Like, what's the lineage from Mr. Taylor to you?
Man, the lineage for me is expectations and like no excuses. Like, and I think if you were to talk to like my kids that are now sophomores, juniors, seniors, that are still in band, that are drum majors and section leaders and state players and all of that I taught them in middle school. One of my phrases was like, no excuses, right? Like no excuses. Kids will come up, and I can remember being on the bandstand and being in front of the kids. I'm like, hey guys, what does this sound like? And the class would be like, this sounds like an excuse, you know? And so it's, and we playing and being jovial, but at the same time, Mr. Taylor was, if there was something to be done and he expected something from you, you had to get it done. And it was just that simple. And I think for me, what it made me see, as an African-American male, that would be futurely in an environment that I would probably see more of you, Mark, than I would see of myself. I have to be committed to this, the expectation to reach it and to not create excuses, to do everything in my power to make sure I've done the study, I've done the practice, I've covered all my ends. That way, when I put forth my product, when I stand and perform a piece or whatever, I can say I did everything in my power. Not, oh, we didn't get to that. Well, you know, I don't have, there's an excuse. And what he was kind of teaching me was that I'm not going to allow you, that's a part of this product that I've developed and built, to take away from what I've envisioned. And in turn, you're going to do the same for me, right? That we are tied together in this student, teacher, mentor, mentee relationship where I'm pouring into you and I'm not going to give you any excuses. I'm going to make sure that I'm 110% in whatever you need musically, whatever, as your teacher, as your educator. And then in turn, you're going to make sure you pour back into me to make sure that we're both good on both ends. So I think what's in my lineage right now is just this aspect of that we're going to figure out a way to get it done, because I'm going to make sure we get it done. And I'm going to be the same consistency every day. Every day I like so bad where the kids that I just started teaching this year in Lake O, they would literally be like, oh, man, you don't miss school. Like, you come in, you don't forget anything. Like, we do the same. Like, like, you don't take no, and they had just come from an environment where they had a different percussion director every semester. They didn't have one at one point in time. You know what I'm saying? So here comes this guy that says, hey, I gave out these directives at the beginning of the week. Friday is our testing day. Are you prepared? And there was no, well, I didn't get to, hey, I'm prepared. And I would always turn the page and say, if I came to class and I didn't teach you, or if I didn't have my books, or if I didn't have my sticks, or I wasn't prepared to instruct you, what would you say? Well, you probably wouldn't be a good teacher. Well, this is why I'm trying to help you see that I got to be consistent. And then I kind of pour into the aspect of we're percussionists. If anything, the band director may not understand a 5-stroke roll, a flam tap, whatever, but they are looking for a consistent flow of tempo and time to be able to make musically what we're doing cohesive. So I think those two things, like this, or three, this expectation, no excuses, and then a consistency throughout all of that. A consistency to meet the expectation and being consistent and not creating excuses to not meet that expectation.
Well, there's one thing I think that transcends any sort of cultural or racial boundaries, and that's that kids who have consistency flourish. Period. And those are the same kids that by the end of the year, they're now looking at me if I skip over something, right? If we're doing something and I say, all right, let's move to this, then they're saying, Mr. McClean, we forgot to do our XYZ. Because they finally figured out that I'm not going to change. I'm going to be the same person. So either you're going to come up to the expectation and start to grow and deal with the hard conversation and just confronting where you lack, or you're just going to fall by the wayside. And that's life. That's life. When you get out in the real world, there's people that exceed and people that make excuses. So, yeah. I want to talk about the HBCU experience a little bit, because I taught for a year at Florida A&M University when I finished my doctorate in Tallahassee, Florida at FSU. And I had a terrific teaching year. It's one of the great teaching years of my life. Man. When I read that took me by. I was like, man, Mark, you've been everywhere, Mark. Done a little bit of everything. I've had quite the varied career now.
That's dope.
You're only my third guest who's graduated from an HBCU. I had Chandler Wilson on the show, who I actually taught class piano to at FAMU. Now he's the assistant band director at FSU.
Yeah. I just saw that on Instagram not too long ago.
Yeah, and I had Adrian Barnes, who went to Bethune.
Okay, yeah.
And now you from Prairie View. And I've asked each of those guests to talk about the HBCU experience because I think it's really unique and it's empowering. And I just want you to kind of share your experience a little bit.
So I'm gonna give you. So one of my professors, she was the piano professor. She taught music history. Just an amazing person, amazing musician, and just a hard ass, to be quite honest. Like Dr. Selden, short lady, but meant business. Like that was a class I heard about my first day on campus. Like walking into the music building, it was like, yeah, but Dr. Selden. Like she kind of walked in the hallway and everybody was like, hey, doc. And it just kind of like, wah, 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 wah. Like it was literally something out of a movie. But I tell this story. She just had like a 50th party, or she had a birthday party celebrating her, birthday, and she was inviting, different professors and things like that. And I got an email from her. Right now, I haven't been in school since I was at Prairie View from fall 06 to spring 11. I haven't been there in years. Right, outside of going during homecoming, trying to visit and things like that. For her to reach out to me and some of my other colleagues while we were students there, it speaks to what you get from being in an HBCU, which is this family, right? Like I still have most of my professors' numbers. We are friends on Facebook where they message me, they hit me about, hey, I have a student that's getting ready to come out. Hey, I'm listening to your podcast. Hey, I saw the video of your performing group. You guys sound great. I don't know too many of my other colleagues that come from the UTs, the U of H's, the, Rice's and all of these other schools that they have that, right? And they still may know those professors, but the experience for me was that these directors were looking out for me in ways that I don't know if I would have got that had I went to a Texas Tech. And I'm not here to, I don't want people to hear me saying that those schools don't do that or that may not be there. I'm just saying for me, being at that school, seeing doctoral, people of color, which in my mind I hadn't really seen, just to be quite honest, Mark. Like I had, I had my band director who was a, master's of performance trombone. I saw different people come in and clinic us. But for the most part, they were white, And so when I saw a doctor of piano, a doctor of theory and all of these things, right? And they were not only developing us, but they were also developed in some of the schools that we had heard about that people have went to. It just blew my mind. It literally blew my mind. And for them to teach with such fervor and energy, to say, when you get out there, you are a representation of not only Prairie View, but these like you stand on our shoulders. And so when I graduated, I just didn't want to embarrass, let alone I didn't want to embarrass my mama, my family, Mr. Taylor, but I didn't want to embarrass these directors who, they were just amazing. Like Dr. Selden, I was able to skip 2 levels of piano when I got in because I had played piano, played in church, took some lessons. And I took the last 2 semesters, and then I took like a private thing with her. And I just wanted to get better. And she even told me, she was like, you have the ability to be, a fairly good piano player, but you're going to have to work your ass off, right? And this is not something that she had to do. This is something that I went to her private and said, I want to take a private study. She took me on, and she treated me not as a percussionist that was just trying to learn some stuff, but as a real student. I can remember the staff putting me on to be the student conductor for the drama and music department. We put on a performance every year, right? And I'm directing, I'm conducting. They're having me run rehearsals, learning how to set the score for all the different instrumentation. Dr. Cornelius, who was the other piano major and theory teacher and analysis teacher, he had me on playing drums and doing some percussion stuff for some productions he was writing. He writes musicals and things like that. So I was a freshman. I had a car. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was having to drive into Houston to do the rehearsals. He knew that I was, down trying to get back and forth. He gave me money. He made sure I had gas in my car. And he taught me a lesson that says, when you've been hired to do a job, right? It's just kind of this reinforcement of no excuses. When you've been hired, you have to figure out a way to show and prove, because you're not only messing it up for yourself through lack of professionalism, but the next person that comes behind you will be impacted by that. And so these are lessons that I mean, they just took their time to make sure not only did we know the rhetoric and the things we needed to know as an educator, but they took time to help us as people. I have countless of stories of how they've helped pay people's, room and board, bought them books, pay for them to get food. Like, that's just what it was. And it was a family. When I got married, when I had my kids, these people reached out to me. They sent me gifts. And like I said, I hadn't been in school. And for me to be able to be at a place where I can point to them to the point where when they get student teachers getting ready to go out, they send them to me. They send them to Eric. They send them to our other colleagues who are also, directors and educators. So there's an experience that if I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing. The family aspect, the care that they take of you, it leads you to push to be as best as you can be.
Justin, a little bit earlier in your story, you talked about, pushing yourself to be uncomfortable. And I think as musicians, we all experience that, pushing ourselves to be uncomfortable. And that's how we're going to get better. But I think, you and I probably, because, one of the reasons why I reached out to you, and I'll be completely honest about this, is because of the Black Lives Matter movement that's been going on. And you and Justin were really outspoken on your show. And I appreciate that about this. And I think you titled the episode White Fragility and Band Directors.
Yeah. We're just we need you to listen. Any means necessary.
Well, I listened and I knew I had to have you guys on the show after listening to that. And, I think, I don't know if you want to have these hard conversations or not about race in the band world, because, we're doing a lot for diversity. I think things are getting better, but we still have a long way to go, just like every other aspect of society.
Yeah. No, I don't mind, man. Like, I want to say this up front, Mark. I feel very comfortable. I was excited about, doing this interview. And I think that you remind me of people that I encountered that are just willing to hear and talk. And it's not one-sided. Like, I don't want to be, just an echo chamber. I want to talk. I want to expose, be honest. And then let's figure out, hey, how can I meet you in the middle? How can you meet me in the middle? And how can I also inform my other, Black and Latino brothers that, hey, man, we got to realize that people are willing to know and learn to be better. We can't brutalize everybody.
Right. No doubt. And you and I also talked about, I'm going to recommend this book for all of my listeners. I'm reading Ijeoma Oluwa's book, How to Talk About Race. And it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it's really, really been, I'm only on chapter 3. And as I mentioned, I'm like completely like,
like, whoa.
Yeah. I'm kind of in that stage where I'm still processing, because it's a little bit traumatic, because I see a lot of myself in things. And, I don't consider myself a racist person, but yet, we're all products of what we are and our experiences. Yes. My reality is my lived experience, which is not your lived experience.
Exactly.
And so, we have to talk about these things, but we have to talk about it in a way that means we're listening to each other and hearing each other, and not just talking over each other.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we're not going to learn.
We're not getting nowhere.
Yeah, no. So what was the reaction to that episode when it came out?
So for me, I got a lot of, hey, man, I appreciate the episode. I appreciate the information. I think Eric got a few little errant, messages from, believe it or not, people that he went to church with, people that, he spent time, praying, reading scriptures with, and they kind of came at him, on another spectrum. But after, you get past that, for the most part, most people were very open, and they said, hey, man, we appreciate the conversation. And I think when you see the title, it automatically puts your mind to a place. But when you listen to it, right, the head director at Hightower is a white guy, right? And we're good friends. And it's our first year together. And so we have a lot of conversation, and he's very honest about just like what it is and what it isn't. And we were talking one day, like that following week at work, about the episode. And he was like, people are like upset, but did they listen to the episode? And I was like, that's usually how that works, man. We live in a society where, catchphrases and buzzwords lead to an idea instead of saying, okay, let me look at that and let me look deeper. And when you listen to the episode, it's not this bashing thing. It's more of we're trying to gain understanding, and we're trying to make real what people, like you said, have not lived, but you got to be willing to understand that people have lived it, and it's a real thing. And we have to deal with it. We cannot automatically say, well, that's not real for, that's not a thing. Or I've done this, so it can't be. No, you might have been doing some of those things, and that's fine. But there's still some people that are still very much in a place that is starkly different than what you may know.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to caution people is when we talk about race, that doesn't mean we're calling anyone a racist. It's not about an individual. It's about changing the system as a whole.
Yes.
Not,
Yes.
we're all who we are. Like I said, our lived experiences, and that's not always perfect.
Right.
But it's the system. It's recognizing the changes we need to make collectively.
Yes. Yep. And it's not a thing where, like, Mark, you are a white male. I don't fault you for that. There's something unique about you, and I want to know that. And I don't want people, like you said, to hear this. And I'm not painting all white people a certain way, no different than I would want somebody to paint all black people a certain way. I don't hate or have an issue with how people are created and born. You are who you are. You didn't add, it wasn't like you just kind of said, I choose that. This is what it is. And the same for me. So it's also looking at it from a perspective of saying, okay, this is who I am, but what's their story? Let me learn their story so I can learn how to be receptive, be understanding, and be treat a person like I would want to be treated. Get to know me, know who I am, so.
Well, let's try to apply some of these things to the band community specifically, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate a lot.
All right, here we go.
Well, we've all heard the things.
Yeah,
we've all seen them on Facebook. We've seen the comments on those groups.
Right.
So let me start with the issue of diversity in music, the music that we play, and the composers. Right. And one of the things we always hear is, "I just play the best music."
Right. Yeah. And so what I always try to challenge people is, like, let's define what best is, right? Because what may be best to you may not be something that I'm truly interested in, but I can respect what your best is if there's a mutual understanding and level through me being a student and you being a teacher, right? It's this idea that what you value, I value, because this is a relationship that we're building as band director, band student. I can't treat you as some type of robot that you come in my classroom, you sit in your chair, you clean your instrument. When you hear the bell go and the metronome come on, it's time to go to work. I need to value and bring into a real conversation about what best can define and how best pours out to all aspects of music. So are we exposing people to the best of what you know or what you're comfortable doing research on? Or have you sought out other aspects of music, watch this, even in your genre that you may teach heavily in, which may be classical? Have you sought out Black composers and Latino composers and people that don't look like you or don't run the gambit or the list of names, right? That we have? Do we look at that? So yeah, I think not only the music you choose, but how you choose it, right? I think sometimes we can choose things to celebrate one type of thing, right? So if it's Black History Month, then we gonna go down the gamut of Black jazz composers and this, that, and the third. But how do we make that a part of the general conversation? And how do we reframe what we consider music? I think it deals with the framework. We got to go back and say, all right, if we're going to build the foundation has to involve this smorgasbord of people and ideas, so that way when we say best, that best is talking about the music in general, and then we can start to pick out, oh, well, this person has a great collection, this person, I love this piece that they play, and so when we say best, because it's been stemmed around, or it's been around this idea of these directors, this type of music, this is best, this is other. Well, now where's the diversity? Because now you're telling me that the other is not, it's only important when we have to show face. It's only important with its, Cinco de Mayo. It's only important if we are doing something that deals with African American culture. So it's not that it is the status quo. So that's what would be. I think we got to reframe it, redefine these words, and then start doing the hard work of inserting people that maybe that's not what you played in college. You didn't necessarily weren't familiar with them. Even in your first few years of teaching, what's wrong with just taking a listen on J.W. Pepper? What's wrong with going through, I have to do that as a director. I have to go through pieces and say, this may work. Oh, I like this writer, whatever.
Yeah. It's not saying that we're not going to play Holst anymore. It's saying we can also play Omar Thomas, or we're not going to play Brian Balmage's music. We're also going to play Kevin Day's music.
But I think that's the scary part. Like when we start talking this, it's like, oh well, are we cutting out Brian? Are we cutting out Randall Stange? No, these people are still apart. We're just saying, hey, let's open the door and bring all of these people in.
Right. I think that's the myth, right? Is that this idea of there's a pie and there's only a certain number of slices?
Yeah.
There's no pie. I am a white male composer. I have music that's being sold to band directors.
Yeah.
But there is plenty of room for my music and everyone else's.
The table is huge, and I think we've done a bad job of saying that the table only has like 12 chairs, when in actuality, it's a room. Everybody's walking in, everybody's walking out,
Right. So I'm going to, again, this is less devil's advocate than just reality. Budgets are tight. So what if I have to choose like this classic that the students just have to play? This Granger piece they just have to play, and I don't have the budget to pay for, a work by Kate Nishimura.
So what I would say is, how can we figure out, if you got to get that piece, go ahead and get that piece, right? I get it. You want them to play that piece. That's fine. Granger, yes. What are we doing? What other avenues are we using? Whether that's parental, right? That we have a band booster, or are we reaching out to our fine arts directives, right? Do we have any money in a band account where it don't take, your whole band account to buy 2 pieces, right? Right. Like, are we looking at other avenues, or are we just saying, well, the budget's tight? Okay, the budget may be tight. Your principal may have said, hey, this is what we're giving you. We don't have any more money, right? But have we looked at other avenues, and have we reached out to some of these directors and composers to say, hey, I'm really trying to create a diverse world in my band hall. Is there any way that there could be a bartering of some sorts? Can I borrow this and you can use something from me? Can we figure this out? And I think that people are willing to do that when they know that it's in the means of educating kids past what the dollar can do. And if you really care, you can dig in your own pockets and buy music. I've done it plenty of times. Like, that's just me. Let's exhaust every avenue before we say, oh, well, I don't, it's not in the budget.
Yeah. I mean, I that's a slippery slope. I caution against that, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's just the old teacher in me speaking, Justin.
Oh, listen, I've heard and I've tried to keep it on the hush, but there's been some moments where I'm like, okay,
everyone's done that. Everyone's dug in their own pocket for their kids. We've all done that. I just, it's
with caution, for sure.
It's that 25 years. I'm like, oh boy, just be careful.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the director and you coming out, Mark.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's
never gonna leave.
I'm trying to think of some of the other things that I hear a lot. They're insidious, and they're often not really direct. That's what racism and I'm not, sure. Again, I'm going to say this again. I'm not saying any of my listeners are racist. I'm just talking about the things that come out that we're not even aware of.
Conversation.
Yeah, that we're not aware of. And that's where my eyes are beginning to open up after reading this.
Right.
I guess, what other ways do you see it manifest itself in the band community that we can be better as a whole? And again, speaking of what can we do to raise our level as educators?
One of the things that I did, and this is just from my own walk, right? When I was at Hamilton Middle School as a director of bands, me and Eric were there together. Eric was the head and I was assistant. He ended up moving to high school. I stayed behind to continue to cultivate and develop as that being a feeder program for 2 high schools in the community. I'm an African-American male. For the most of my career, I've taught majority Latinx community. I've had my African-American kids. It's definitely been a mix of Latin America or Latinx and African-American kids. A few white kids here and there. But for the most part, that's what it was. So there was some learning that I had to do, right? And one of the things that I did was I asked the kids, what did they like? What do you listen to? And then in my choosing of music, where, in Texas, I have to play a grade 3 or a grade 2 or grade 4, whatever, I tried to make sure I was being relevant in those things. Am I pulling music that would, obviously I can't just pull, there's no Norteña music or, that in the category, which would be great. And we can have that conversation. But am I pulling some things that would connect with them? I remember doing Spania by David Schaefer, right? it is a really cool piece. It's a march. The kids loved it. It had that very big bravado Spanish flair to it, and my kids loved it, right? And I only knew that because I asked them what music they listened to. Like, I would tell them, hey, what is some norteño? Mrs. McClean, you need to listen to this person. You need to listen to this person. I would take those names now and I would put those songs into my phone. I would drive to school and be living my life and be like, okay, that's pretty cool. I like that rhythm. Well, then now I'm looking at pieces that make most of, clave and Latin, 3 against 2, 2 against 3 rhythms against maybe the classical chords and phrasing of what's happening in the music. And so for me, it's getting to know the students you teach. It's learning your environment, and not just from a demographic of saying, oh, we have this amount of this, we have this amount of this, they pay this amount of money. No, I'm saying know that, but who are your students? What do they like? What do they listen to? And that can help you frame and shape how you build your programs, how you build, the music that you play. Granted, we would love to sit around and play all of the songs they listen to, but that's not a realistic thing. And I don't think we would be doing the institution of music education any justice if we were just one-sided, right? So I want to expose them to everything, but even in my exposing them to the classical world, how can I pull from some of the things that they've done? So maybe it may not be for contests. It may be that we perform this piece and program this piece for our end of year concert, or we do it for our holiday concert, or the last few years I was at Hamilton, we would do a fall concert where we would do different pieces centered around, maybe Mexican American heritage, Halloween, different stuff like that. So it's giving them this wide variety. And then also explaining to them, like, what does it mean for us to go to Concert UIL and why we play these pieces? Why I can't pull this, but I have to play a Granger, or I have to play a Balmages, or I have to play, whoever, right? So that's what I would say. That's the biggest thing that helped me, man. And I'm dealing with a community that's similar to the Black community. There are some things and themes that are the same, but man, it was just me asking questions and being vulnerable and being okay that I didn't know everything.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. No minority community has the same experience as No. The one thing I really like about that, Justin, that story from your time at Hamilton, is that you actually went and you listened to the music. You educated yourself in the musical culture, so that when you then go choose music for those students, you're not choosing music that's aping that culture or, parroting that culture. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right. Yeah.
It's an authentic adaptation of that music.
Yes.
And feels authentic to the students.
Right. And I think I'm not trying to like parody or be very like, oh, we're gonna do this. I think I'm trying to pull from what I've heard, what they've said, and things that they would be able to connect with. So when we're doing, those different pieces, when we're doing Las Madres, de los Gatos, like that is something that appeals because it has this very big bravado and heaviness to it, right? And that's very much a part of the culture. They're very proud. Yeah, they're very proud people of where they come from. And so hey, let's do it. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever the case may be, So I think listening and having an ear, because what they listen to also kind of describes who they are, right? Music is so connected to history because the history represents like the person, how we think, how our thinking motivates our action. So that music kind of gives the soundtrack to who we are. So I wanted to kind of build that. And, for the most part, I would always get from judges, hey, I really like the lineup of your program. I like the order of the song, so that was my thing that I was trying to do.
Right. So a couple questions that come up to me, and I think these are also have loaded connotations when it comes to race. And the one that really is an issue, I think, is classroom management. The way, kids who are Black are treated, and disciplined more, and
I've seen it.
Yeah, I know you've seen it. I've seen it too, and I don't think I'm not going to say I don't think I've done it, because I had a kid who was a real pain in my butt, but I don't, I probably maybe could have been different with him. And I guess maybe that I'm going to ask my next question. We'll piggyback them on together, because as I talked about my lived experience, and, especially as a theory teacher when I was teaching college, because college is a different kind of game, right?
It is.
And, when I have an expectation that comes from my cultural background, the son of two college educated parents,
Right.
me going to college with that
Background.
with that privilege
Yeah.
of having had parents who taught me how to go to college, who taught me, as my father used to say, how to play the game.
Yeah.
When I would teach a student who didn't have that privilege and that background, and this goes to classroom management too, how do we bridge that cultural gap there so that we're holding them to our expectations, as you mentioned earlier, but we're also respecting what they don't know.
So I think what we miss a lot of times when I see kids being treated wrong, or I see this kind of preconceived notion set upon children, whether Black or even some of my Latino kids, it comes from not only a lack of understanding background, but an unwillingness to develop a relationship. And I mean that in regards to, it's not hard for you to like, and this is even for me, it's not hard for you to like and want to teach effortlessly a kid who's willing to come in, sit down, put their stuff away, and not cause them any issues, right? But there's something to be said that for the kid who comes in that talks a lot, always forgets something, I left my reed, I didn't bring my instrument, I don't have my music, all of these things, right? You then begin to treat education as you earned this, and because you're unwilling to act, I'm going to withhold this from you. And I think that's the hard truth that I had to get even in some of my earlier days, because most of my kids be like, man, Mr. McClean had me scared in 6th grade. He was this, he said, do this. And that's just how I run my room, to the point where I had other teachers coming in like, what are you giving these kids? Why did they, like a 6th grade history teacher came in my room one time to ask me something about a student. And he walked through the door, and I was in the middle of teaching, and no child turned around. This is my 6th grade beginner brass class. Nobody even flinched. After the class, he's like, what the hell are you doing in here? I was like, hey, man, they know what it is, man. When they come in here, we're not playing. But we cannot treat education as, if you do these things, then you deserve to learn. We have to treat it as, you deserve to learn, and I need to do the hard work of learning why it may be hard for you to understand the environment. And once you've done that, happens through relationship. That happens through letting kids know, hey, I know you may be going through something right now, but when we come in here, you already know what it is. I need you to be quiet. I need you to sit there. Now, if we need to go outside and have a conversation, let's do that. Or, so that doesn't become an excuse every time, we'll talk after class. You're not having a good day today? I need you to focus in right now. Give me the best you got for this next 45 minutes to an hour. We'll talk after class. I'll write you a pass to the next class. That, in that moment, that lets that child know that you respect me enough that I'm going to do what's right. But when that kid comes in, and because you've let something that happened last Thursday shape how you're teaching them on Monday, then they already dropped the ball, and you've already set up the barrier. So when they come into class, you're saying, hey, class, I need you guys to get your pencils out. We're going to start warm up. I need you to have your music out in this order. Can you please sit at the back? We'll get your instrument out if you show me that you're ready to learn. In that moment, that shows the class that they're more valuable, and that student feels ostracized because he might have gotten up and didn't get breakfast, or his parents may be going through a divorce, or, I've had crazy things happen. I had a kid who came to class crying and just acting crazy, but he had just found out his sister committed suicide the week before. If I'm not willing to learn him, if I'm not willing to have that conversation, then he's lost. And I think we have to get back to a relationship framework. My mother was an educator and a principal. She told me, she said, when you get in the classroom, there's going to be like this 90-10 thing happening. You're only really going to be able to teach 10% because the other 90 is going to be used to gain control of your class. The goal is trying to get that to 50-50. Where you can spend 50% of time of trying to shape the class, dealing with the personalities and getting people to, hey, lock into your system. And then you got that 50% of learning. And then after a while, you can now get it to 90-10. Now you're teaching, and that 10% is after school, after class. And if it rises to 20 or 30 on some days, it's because you've taken time to learn that, okay, this kid Both of their parents are splitting up, so he's having some issues. This child is always acting out. He needs attention. She needs attention. This child is not talking today because a teacher in first period told him to shut up, and it wasn't their fault that they were all of these things are happening in my head, and that takes a little bit more work than what they teach you in your your educational foundation classes or your brass method class. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we just be honest. And I think it's hard to build a relationship because I think that's like a taboo thing, especially with some of the ill things that happen in the school setting. So notice when I'm saying relationship, I'm just saying being open to know kids and to be okay that this is a 12-year-old. This is a 13-year-old. Even in high school, I tell my kids now, y'all just older teenagers or older sixth graders. That's it. Y'all just bigger sixth graders. You still have the same issues. And I'm learning how to when to pour it on, when to pour it off. You figured it out to a certain extent when you figure out what buttons to push for each student. I know, even some of the kids now that they're no longer under my teaching, I haven't taught them, but I can still see them and they can call me and ask me questions. And I know exactly what to do and how to go about it because I know the student. I've observed you. And so those behavior problems, that's a cop-out for me to not want to know you, for me to not want to identify with your issues.
Yeah, I always think about it. I feel terrible. I had a student a couple years back who came from really urban environment. I'm coding that. I probably should.
For sure.
He came from a pretty bad background, but really talented musician. I won't say what he did. Mm-hmm. Really talented kid. He was like, I taught freshmen, the first semester theory, but then I taught the trailer theory for the kids who didn't pass the first semester. And he was there and I did everything I could. I couldn't, he just didn't have that background to do it.
To be able to connect. Yeah.
And I still to this day wonder what I could have done different for him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes in a line of fire, like because somebody else earlier dropped the ball, you still have to kind of deal with the outcome of that. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's been like and I think that's why it's so important for me. There's a conviction that I have in teaching kids that I don't want to mess you up for whatever your purpose in life is. Whether you go on to be an educator, music educator, professional musician, or a doctor, I don't want to scar you. I don't want to, even in the accountability and the criticism, and we know how hard that can be in music education, where we have to make people responsible for, hey, you played that wrong. Hey, that's an incorrect note. Hey, why aren't you I have to figure out how to still give that harsh information, still show grace through truth, because what is said could damage or propel them for the next few years. And you might have encountered that student after so much damage on top of him coming from a very bad situation. You know what I'm saying? So
I just don't think he had any idea how to make it work. And that's what's sad. I mean, how do you undo a lot of that damage?
Yeah. But that's a whole nother conversation about diversity, even in how we build our staffs on that level, right? That Mark, you have so much to offer, but what does it look like? And I'm going to use me for example. If I'm there also on staff working, maybe I don't have that student directly, but you can step into my office and say, yo, Justin, I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, and I can then pull that student in, and there's this coming together of two people from two different backgrounds. They look different, black, white, to unify, to help a person that may not even look like Mark. And vice versa. I can come to you and like, man, I got this kid. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And so until representation matters, I'll say that.
Representation absolutely does matter.
It matters.
Yeah,
it matters.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
It matters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are interesting issues because, I have kids, I teach at a Jewish community school, and I have kids with the same kind of behavioral problems that you do, they do the same goofy stuff, that they challenge in the same ways. And, it's not that anyone is sort of unique in their struggles, but everyone's unique in their story.
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Everyone has struggles. I've had struggles. You've had struggles, but we're different. We just have different kinds of things. So
for sure.
Anyway, so I hope this has been a productive conversation. I hope that listeners, I haven't turned anyone off to this, but I just want to confront these issues because we're in a time when we need to confront these issues because I think people are maybe receptive to it in a way that we haven't seen in a long time.
And I think to have people, for you to have me on the show, and to be very honest, I think it says a lot to the reconciliation and just the conversation that's needed, that you are from a different walk of life. I'm from a different walk of life, but we have this commonality through music, the music ed, where we can sit here and have honest conversation, and it's not me bashing you as a white person, or even in you playing devil's advocate. It's like, hey, what are some of these answers? And then as you mull over it, as you think through it, find out where you may have had a blind spot. And just, if we're gonna fix the the whole, it starts, with little things that individuals do. So if you're listening, with the convo and the dialogue that we having, pull from it where it points to you and your specific situation.
Yeah, you and I could have easily had a conversation about how to teach, compound meter.
Right.
But that's not really what this was about tonight,
Right. Because compound meter is at the end of the day, we can teach that all day.
Right.
But how do we even get the kid or the student or the environment you're in to be open to hear that from you without having to, how do we get there?
Right. Yeah. To me, it's never about the curriculum. It's never about the content. My whole philosophy about being a teacher is I don't teach a kid how to play a clarinet. I use the clarinet to teach a kid.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That just hit me, man. Cause I think for me as an educator, of course, I want to teach you how to play what format. Let's get the technique right. Let's be afraid, hey, that paradiddle, whatever. But at the end of the day, there's something that we're doing that's going to help you in your life. And if I can help you with that.
Yeah, I told the story at Midwest. I had a student at the school I'm at, and I teach fourth graders, and this is only my second year teaching kids this young, fourth grade beginners.
Wow.
He really struggled with his instrument. Really struggled to get a sound the first day, and I kept saying, do the clarinet. So I'm making images, and I'm trying to get him to get the embouchure right, corners, draw strings, all that.
Focus the air, aim down,
all that stuff,
Yeah.
And he just couldn't get the sound, and he just burst into tears.
Yeah.
Because he put so much pressure on himself to be good, and perfect,
right.
And so I knew from that moment that my mission for the year with him was to build his self-confidence. It had nothing to do with teaching him how to be a good player.
But Mark, you just said something that we've kind of touched on and been talking about. You took time to analyze and say what's more important in this moment. Is it him making sure he can play his concert B flat, one octave with good tonality and be able to read a grade one piece of music by the end of the year? No. It is him building that confidence, and that stuff will happen. And when it happens, it becomes instant. And I think we teach in a world that's very competition based, and hey, where are your plaques? Where this, then the third, and we sacrifice these students and their emotions and who they are. We're in their preparation process of them becoming who they are going to become, and we're willing to stunt their growth to make sure we have a plaque that preaches to our insecurity rather than who they need to be.
It's a powerful way of putting it.
That's a hard thing. And I think for me, as much as I've been blessed to make some ones and make, my 112s and 22, all that, been in the area and all of that stuff. And it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great. But the best feeling is to know that through a journey of sixth beginner, seventh grade, eighth grade, and we've achieved that, their mind is like, oh, we made a one. I remember, I have a student right now, Shannon. She's a section leader. High school I used to teach at. I taught her in sixth grade saxophone. Was able to continue teaching her at Heights when me and Eric worked together. She's from a collection of students that have a great place in my heart. She always remind me, young black girl, her mother's an educator. She would say, Mr. McClean made me cry every day of sixth grade because he was just like, and he was like, I lost first chair. But she progressively has gotten better. She has progressively grown. And she will always say, if I didn't experience that, if he didn't help me and grow me, I don't know if I would be here today. And for me, that is the testament. That's the affirmation that I needed to know that what I'm doing is right. It's not that I have my name on some plaques, on some UIL staple. That's great. At the end of the day, that experience she had in sixth grade and this experience that she'll talk about with the rest of those kids that I taught, it is, I don't know. I can't even explain it, Mark. I can't. It is.
Yeah, I had I think it was Mickey Smith Jr. who I had on the show, and he talked about how a student came back to him and said that, she was suicidal, and he basically band saved her life. And this is the broader issue, is we see it all the time. I was a high school band director. I've been a middle school band director. I've been a college professor. Students who come to you and say your class or band is the only reason I come to school, or that is a
real thing.
It is a real thing.
Yes.
And for a lot of kids, it's their social circle, it's their identity, and it saves their lives in some cases. In the extreme cases, of course.
Oh yeah. I had a kid. He graduated high school, he's been in junior college. He hit me on Instagram and said, "Hey, Mr. McClean, can we talk? I have a few questions I want to ask you about where I'm going to do with my life next." And this is kind of right around the whole George Floyd, and he's trying to figure out where he wants to finish his education. So I haven't talked to Dorian in years. He calls me. I talk to him. He's like, "Mr. McClean, I'm finishing up. I played a little football there. I'm trying to figure out, where should I go to another, JUCO or another school, Division III, where I can continue playing football, or should I stay home and go to Prairie View and just finish my degree? I'm thinking about, I want to start my own business, all this stuff." So I gave him the facts. I said, "Hey man, if you are interested in developing a career that's going to be longevity, where you can invest and have the things you need, I think you need to look at the bigger picture. Can you go play football? But is that a real thing? Are you going to go to the NFL or anything like that? And he was like, "Well, no, I just want to play. I'm looking to start my own fitness company." All that. I said, to me, it makes sense that you would go to a school where you can invest in getting a, background in business, understanding all of what that is, get a mentor to be able to help you set your business up correctly and all this kind of stuff. And I said all that to say, he was a percussionist. He was in my jazz band as a middle school student, top band, great kid. But we haven't, why would he call me about that when I was strictly a band director?
Yeah, well, he thought of you as more than that.
And I think that's what we have at that moment. And I told my wife, she was like, all your kids have this experience and connection with you. And I'm just trying to be as honest and open and push them as hard as I can to meet my standard as an educator. And we got this to play for. You need to sound good, be in tune. But also to say, this is just a small taste of how you have to push yourself in the world. And I had to get out of my comfort zone and know the Latino community. And for those listeners that are in mixed environments, maybe you're in urban Title I and you got more brown kids, more black kids, whatever, do yourself a service by getting to know them, getting to learn them, because you don't know, 9 times out of 10, it may not be anything you conduct or do with your baton that changes their life. It just may be a simple, "Hey, how's your mother doing? How's your family?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question.
That's just been my experience, Mark. Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, it's been true for my life. It's been true for my whole thing. As soon as I start putting myself before the students, that's when the teaching becomes worse, and I don't do that anymore. But, there were times in my early career where I did. For sure. It became about me. It became, as you said, about trying to win that trophy, or
got to get that trophy, man.
Or maybe in the early days as a college professor when I was scrambling just to keep up because I didn't, the content was overwhelming the teaching, which happens too.
Yeah.
So, especially in a class, I don't need to talk about that, but theory is such a content heavy class that there's times
for sure,
when it can overwhelm the actual teaching, the point of the whole thing.
Right. Because you're trying to make sure, hey, you need to understand this. We need to move to this chapter. We got to get here.
Yeah, which is a bad way to teach, but
yes, I agree.
But
we've been there, and I've been there. I've been more caught up in the score where I'm ignoring kids, and I'm irritable on the stand because you didn't rehearse this section the way I taught you, and this is out of tune, and I just fixed this yesterday. So I've been there.
Yeah. Well, everyone has been because at the end of the day, it is about the kids, but by the same token, we also have a job to do. So you try to balance that. There's a balance there. Where you said it too. There's expectations that have to be met, otherwise you're not teaching the kids.
Yeah. And if we go that extra mile to develop that relationship, when there are those times where I gotta be on y'all, because we gotta get this done. It's more receptive. It's more understood, because they know. All right.
They're not going to be resentful.
Exactly.
Because you haven't heaped it on them every day.
Right.
Because, it's also to the broader issues we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's a accumulation of little things lead to big things. And so if we keep pushing on the kids, and we never get them to buy in to us by buying into them.
Yeah.
Then they're going to start to resent us rather than work for us.
Exactly.
And then you're just going to exacerbate your classroom management issues. You're not going to have good rehearsals. They're not going to practice.
And whatever you accomplish will be more of a, I'm glad this is over, rather than look at what we've done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And if you're a first or a second year teacher and this is your feeling, you're listening to this and going, that's me, I'm terrible. You're not terrible. You're just young.
Yeah.
These things come with time.
They come with time. And what I would encourage you to do after your second year, you have to sit down once you've turned in all your stuff, and you got to have that. You got to make a list. You got to say, what 10 things did I do well? What 10 things did I do bad? And be brutally honest. Like, I don't know how to tune this instrument. I didn't do well with handling this conflict. And then figure out out of those 10 things, what can you pull from the 10 things you did well that can start to cancel out what you don't do well.
Self-reflection's a big deal.
It's the biggest thing. And I would also say, have recordings of not only your performances, but how you taught. And allow other directors to watch a video of you teaching.
It's a hard place, man. That takes courage.
It really is. It does. It does. But if you want to see your program grow and get better and become a really a beacon of light, if that makes sense, you got to be willing to let the same instruction fall on you that you push on your students.
Yeah, I always give advice to young teachers. I keep a journal. And I like about once a week, once every 2 weeks, just depends how things are going. I type some things in the journal, like, okay, this has been going well. This hasn't been going well. And I've been doing this a long time. So, I mean, I kind of know how to fix them, but I want to see them. I want to acknowledge it. I want to take that moment to say, okay, what has been happening, rather than just assuming it's what I think. Because again, this is that same thing we've been talking about. My lived reality isn't actually what's happening in the classroom.
Yep. I would always keep the scores from UIL, and I would keep each judge from pre-UIL all the way up to the actual thing. And I would read them after. And once we ended the school year and we finished with our end of year concert, banquet, all that, I would pull those scores out at home and I would read through them, and I would pick out all of the same things that each judge said across all the pieces. And I'd make a list and say, these are the things that I want to fix this year. So whether I get a 1, whether we come away with a sweepstakes, or if we get a 2, did I get better at instructing phrasing, breathing, and it just kind of helped me. And then I would look at next year's, sheets. Did this comment get on this sheet? And if it didn't get there, then I did a really good job of making sure I taught to that, So that's just some of the things that's kind of helped me along the way.
Remember your first term of teaching? Learning all the skills that you don't get taught in music school? Managing a transitioning culture in your classroom? Finding out that you have to teach guitar this term? During those early years, we found out that leaning on a community of music educators was important, not only for building that knowledge in ourselves, but also maintaining enough sanity to serve the students right in front of us. Amused is a podcast centered around a community of music teachers. Between the 4 of us, we teach choir, band, orchestra, general, jazz, and marching band at the elementary through collegiate levels. We certainly don't have all the answers, but you're welcome to listen in while we try to find them. Join us while we work through the challenges of music teaching and celebrate the joy of bringing music making into the lives of young people. In each episode, you'll hear stories, both good and bad, about that week of teaching, and we'll try and tackle an issue that one of us is struggling with. Something we're all taught is that music brings people together, but being the only teacher in your subject at a site can be really isolating. We think everyone ought to be a part of a community, and you're welcome to come join ours. Episodes come out on Wednesdays during the school year, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and at amusedcast.org.
So, Justin, we've been going for like a while now.
Yeah, man, it's been good. Can we do this every week? Every week, helping me out, brother.
So how about, let's go on to my final questions. I don't know if you've listened to my show, but I ask every guest a set of questions. The same questions I ask every guest. And so, Justin, the first question is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Man, where do I draw the line? You know what I try to do? I draw the line in allowing people that don't know my students to fully define everything that they do. So I want them to respect what judges say, but I also want them to acknowledge the work that they did. Kind of pointing to what you said with that young 4th grader, right? In years prior, my first, 3-4 years, maybe my first 3 years, I put a lot on what the judges say. And I think it became unhealthy because it made kids really be like, well, I'm trash. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, I suck. And so around the third year, going into, my fourth year, I started to say, okay, I have to teach them what they need to be prepared for, but I also need to teach them how to appreciate the process of preparing, right? That, hey, the judges are going to be listening for this. You need to know this. You can't breathe at the end of this phrase, all of those things. But then when we get there, do a really good job of saying all the work you've done a great job of becoming better than where you were last May or even in the beginning of the school year. So I draw the line in letting those judges, as much as I respect them, I don't want them to define the work that they've done, right? Because you can attest, you can go to a competition and have a good run, but the day before it was amazing. So that's my line where we start to define and negate all of the work that's being done because this person said this one thing for this one performance. I want to draw the line there so I don't allow you to not enjoy the process of making music.
All right, the next question, Justin, is one that a lot of music teachers struggle with. We as a profession have jokes about it, but how do you find a work-life balance in your career as a music educator?
Man, so early on, I'm heavy in my church. I'm working on graduate work in seminary. And so I've always been playing, even through my years of, being a director of bands. I was the MD at my church, and I was, early on in my career, I was still, me and my wife weren't married or dating yet, but I was playing for her at different, club nights and doing different, like I would leave work, go home, change, pack up my equipment, hit downtown Houston, set up with the band, and we're doing different, open mics, this, that, and the third, hitting, all that stuff. And then I would be doing studio. Like, Mark, I wouldn't advise anybody to do this. I was 25, 24, whole day of work on a Thursday, go to the studio at 8 o'clock, stay there till 12 or 1, get back up at 5 and teach. It was crazy. But what I've been able to do is create the time, right? Like when I'm off in the summer, I don't do anything geared towards school. Like even when I started teaching high school, when my summertime came and on weekends, that was my time to not be focused. I left work at work, right? And even when I was younger, and I would stay after for kids to get picked up, and I would do my score study and organize a library. But when I got home, I got to a place where I was like, I'm not looking at a score. I'm not listening to music. I'm going to be at home. And at times it killed me because I would get home like, man, let me look at this real quick. Let me analyze this. I just stopped doing it. And even now at 32 and I'm going into my 10th year, I'm not doing anything musical when I'm at home. And now, I have children. I have a wife. So nothing musical happens at home unless I want it to happen. When I leave work, I leave work. That's why I maximize myself at work. I get there early, do what I need to do. If I need to stay a few hours late, after that, when I get home, I'm here with my family. I'm doing things. I'm working on a podcast, being with my wife, getting ready to do graduate work, stuff I do for church. And so I would tell everybody, don't feel guilty about not being a band director when you're not in the band hall.
Mm-hmm. My father taught for 54 years. One of the things that he told me when I was a young teacher is once the tires hit the road outside the school parking lot, you leave everything there.
That's it.
Bring it home with you.
And it relieved me of so much. The stress, the weight, your brain is constantly thinking like, did I get that? I need to move to this section tomorrow. Oh, I got it. Those sixth graders, we missed a day. I got to get them caught up. All that's happening. When I get home, when I was single, I'm eating my dinner, I'm watching TV or whatever, or if I'm going to hang out with some friends after work, that's what I'm doing. And when I get back to work, I'm still going to be of integrity. I'm going to do my job well. But when I'm home, I'm home. I don't do anything. So, yeah.
All right. So, the next question is a big one, and everyone answers it in their own way. You don't have to try to solve every problem of the world right now. But from your perspective, what are the challenges that are facing band and music education, and any ideas about how we meet those challenges?
Ooh, Mark, going in tonight. I think the challenge is band is not going to look like it has looked for those in the past. Right? That is just the God honest truth. The more I'm going into year 10, and some of the big wigs and the names that we know are either heading for retirement, they are looking to retire. And to be quite honest, and I know this may be kind of iffy, but not only is band changing, but the demographics, right? Everybody that looks like me or that's Latino is also able to live in those environments that sometimes, I'm not going to say all of them, but sometimes directors go to find safety because they don't have to deal with the things that they would have to do some research and understanding on, right? A few years ago, there might have been one of me or 2 to 3 of me in an environment. Now, you may have a good population of your band be very mixed, and it requires you to do some more legwork because now you have people that sit in those chairs that have different lived experiences than you. So some of the things you might have said in the past, which might have connected with your white students, is not going to connect with that black student. It doesn't make you bad. It does not make your experience and what you've said bad. It just shows that what we have done or what we're experiencing is what we should always experience in life, which is consistent and forward moving change. And you got to be willing to meet it. You don't have to have the answers. And I'll say this, with the band culture changing, with the student identity changing, it's going to require our white directors to look towards us and some of our Latino directors to find answers. No different than how we look to you guys in moments where we just didn't have the answers. And that doesn't make me inferior, doesn't make you inferior. It just makes us unique. And it kind of preaches this idea of band, which is all these different instruments coming together to make one harmonious sound. That's the irony, right? That you have a French horn, a bassoon, a clarinet, bass clarinet, percussion, mallet percussion, all starkly different experiences, different way you play them, but they come together, and I'm leaning on the drummer on the snare drum to keep time. I'm leaning on the timpani player to give quality, bottom. I'm leaning on the tuba player to provide the foundation. And I think what we're going into is going to push us to look to not square off into these holy huddles at the region band meeting or at the all city, where all the white directors go over here, all the black and Latino, hey, how's it going? Hey, you doing well? No, but we come together and say, hey man, I'm thinking about playing this piece. Can you help me with this? Or I have a high population of African-American kids and I don't want to seem corny or weird, And I think for me, I don't mind having that conversation. I don't mind leaning towards helping, no different than I don't mind asking for help. Hey, I need help learning how to tune these chords in this piece. Can you show me some tools? Like, I want to be in the know. And so I think we have to be willing to embrace it. And I think our white band directors have to be willing to know that you can't escape change and uncomfortability by going somewhere.
Justin, I just invented a time machine, and I'm going to take you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you telling yourself?
Stay committed. Don't be discouraged by the lack of scores or even your lack of knowledge on how to attain it properly. Be committed to the work and know that what you're doing is going to pay off in the long run. That's what I would say. I would try to impress upon myself at that young age to be committed to who you are and to building relationships, and know that everything you're doing to prove your worth will come, and it's going to pay off in a bigger way than you could ever imagine. Cause that's what I'm living in right now. Like, I say this, Mark, and I don't even say this to be grand or like grandstanding. I didn't ever think that at 32 I would have a voice. I knew that I would do something great. I knew that I would be able to help people, but I was only thinking just from this kind of space we live in America that I would only be able to help people that look like me. Like I was trying to be a voice for people that look like me. And here I am talking to you, having different conversations, getting people reaching out to us to what me and Eric were just talking about amongst ourselves. I don't know if 17, 18-year-old Justin would have pictured his outspokenness and his willingness to help and lead and teach would have benefited everybody. I think at that point I was only thinking like, well, I think black folks will listen to me, and I want to be that voice for my black directors who don't, all of that. But it's actually opened the door for other people who don't look like me, but that are dealing with some of my experiences. So I would say be committed, stay the course, commit yourself to doing what your convictions are, and don't sway to what may garner name success. So. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what you do is with Eric is on the podcast is really valuable. And I think you have the two of you have a way of conversing about it in a way that confronts the issues, but yet makes them accessible to listeners of all cultures, of all races and backgrounds. And I think that's what's really important about your show. And I don't mean that. It's not, I hope it doesn't come off as tokenism, because it's not that. Right. That's not why I like it. I like it because I like it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you took 10 shows and you listened to them intently and said, okay, what can I not only take for myself in terms of helping where I may be, but what can I pour out? Because you're a person that people look to, composers, young directors, people that are looking at like, man, I want to attain what Mark is doing. And I think part of using your expertise and your privilege and your level of professionalism is not only pouring out of yourself, but saying, hey, man, these are some other things that
I appreciate that.
No, that's real, man. That's real. I think it's great what you do. And, there are, young composers, at the HBCU level. There are young composers in the band. And obviously that looks different, in the HBCU culture. It's all about, I'm trying to get my piece played by the marching band. I'm trying to write this crazy piece. But what can we learn from a Mark Connor that will take me just as far as, let's say, a Lindsey Sargent? You know what I'm saying? So, no. Man.
I appreciate that. I mean,
Yes, sir.
I try to give back. That's why I do this podcast, because, the music has given me a career. The band community has given me a place to be. And so I want to make sure I give something back to it. And that means dealing with the hard things too. And not only dealing with the easy things, because when something's a community or a family, that's what you do. You don't avoid the hard issues. You talk about them.
Yeah.
And if they
because
make you
it's
feel
family.
bad, then tough.
Yeah. For real. Yeah.
All right. So this is a hard question. A lot of people don't like this one, but if you had a choice, what would be the final work you'd want to conduct or perform?
I would say Childhood Hymn, man. And I know that's like this extenuous, piece, but to me, it's this innocence, that I think all the, as a band director, you work so hard to kind of remain unscathed from, competition talk or, plaque talk or just all of the things that kind of gives us that vibrato. But I think for me, Childhood Hymn takes me back to a place where music was simpler, where it was this thing of vast enjoyment, and it picked at my imagination because it allowed me to go to a place where there was no I wasn't trying to impress people. I was just playing because this registered with my soul, and it makes me feel it makes me feel strong enough to continue. I can go into this world. I can go to this place where I can kind of encourage myself to go back into reality and deal with what are all I have to deal with as not only a black man, but a black educator, then a black band director. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's a nice, full piece, all instrumentation, people playing their behinds off, and just one good run of Childhood Hymn, man. And that's it for me, man.
All right. Is there anything coming up that you want to share, promote? I know we're kind of in coronavirus land right now.
Anything coming up, promote? Man, we have quite a few things happening with the score. Obviously, you're going to have Eric on. We're doing a CMA webinar about how to build branding through podcasting and how to, promote music education, how to connect with kids, your students. So we're doing that. We are getting an opportunity to kind of, for all of my educators that may be listening that are in Texas, TMEA has a Southwestern musician magazine that happens every year from different write-ups from around the state and things like that. Me and Eric are putting an article in there where we are doing, Mythbusters about teaching in a Title I environment. So we're kind of answering all of these. Well, there's no funding. There's lack of expectation. So we're doing that. Mark, we got a lot of things that's just happening. Even you from here, we don't know what happens and the partnership that we have, and we greatly appreciate it. But I would say CMA webinar, if you looking out on, Southwest Musician, we're doing some work with F Flat Books and putting together basically for all of the last few episodes, putting together like a pamphlet, if you will, of the highlights and a write-up of how to insert that stuff into your classroom. So you can listen to the episode, and then we'll have some actual physical things you can be reading and make a part of your lesson plans and a part of your, daily things that you'll be doing in your classroom. So that's what's happening. By all means, follow us at Pod the Score on Instagram. That'll give it, the same on Facebook and Twitter. A lot of information. We'll be pubbing stuff through that. And man, keep listening. We got some very interesting guests and things that we're lining up and episodes that we look to put together to push us into this new school year, whatever that may look like. So,
Justin, I really want to thank you. Stay healthy down in Texas. And I really appreciate your willingness to talk about race. I know that it's something that you can't hide from. And so I appreciate that you taking the time to talk to us about it. It means a lot. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate the platform and talking to you and just the insight that I've been able to pour from you just in this little bit of time. And I'm praying for y'all's safety and that the year is something great for you, as whatever that looks like.
Well, whatever that looks like. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.